All righties. Well, hello everyone. My name's Nat. This is Exceptional Individuals, and welcome to our Thursday webinars. Today we are going to be looking at Care in the Community. What is it? Does it work? And is it fit for purpose for neurodivergent individuals?
Can I just ask something, please?
Yes, go for it, Beverly.
When we're finished, can I have a copy of your, wait a minute, let me think of the word I'm looking for, PowerPoint?
Yes, you're very welcome. We are
Thank
recording
you.
the session, so it will be uploaded in that form, but you're welcome to have the slides.
Thank you.
But I would ask if you email me directly, just because I don't send it out automatically.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. So while today I'm going to be focusing a little bit of everything, maybe a bit more of a hyper focus on autism more than any, just because though that is a condition which more often than not might require some community loving. But this is mainly focused on mental health. And again, I say it time and time again, being neurodivergent, mental health, not the same thing, but unfortunately they overlap a lot because of the way society treats us. So if we've got all of that under our wing, I think we're good. So here's us. For those of you who have never been to Exceptional Individuals before, social enterprise, supports neurodivergent people, works with organisations to be more inclusive, and try to be nice people at the same time if we're able to. Now, each week we do these webinars. So the last webinar that is edited online is Rise of the Expert by Experience. So do check that out. All right, so today, as we mentioned, is about neurodiversity in the community. And we talked a little bit about the history of recovery and mental health. Long story short, in the olden days, maybe 60s before, it was very much handled in like massive institutions, mental hospitals, insane asylums, things were done in a different capacity. But we also mentioned that though these words are like mental hospitals and stuff sound like really sinister, it wasn't always the case. Sometimes they were actually the best place for individuals, sometimes. And when things kind of moved on to community care, which essentially is getting people out of institutions and putting them in just everyday places. On one hand, this was a more holistic approach, which was a lot kinder and a bit softer. And on the other hand, it was a way of saying, yeah, we don't want to pay the money. It's your problem now, and cutting resources. So it was a bit of a double-edged sword. And today we're going to do a bit more of a hyper focus on this community care. What is it? What does it look like? And does it vary depending where you live? Yeah, it does. And I'd be interested to know where a lot of you live because resources are scarce. Like, I've lived in London the last couple of years, and I tell you, borough from borough, it is so different. Like, sometimes it could be even from like one practice to another practice. The quality of care is, yeah, hit and miss. Now, the people who have supported me have been fantastic, but they haven't had the resources to give me the correct care. Oh, nice. We've got Jane from Newcastle, Northeast. I'd be interesting to know, like, we always hear about the North not getting as much love and attention. Does that translate to care as well? Okay, we've got, Chilbert, Lancashire. Brilliant. I don't, I can't comment whether or not certain places are better or worse, but I can only comment on every place I've been to, the care has not been very consistent. So some of the things we're going to be looking about today is a little bit about my background. Why? Because what makes me suitable to speak about this? We're going to be looking a bit about neurodivergent care. What do we do to support individuals? What is community care? It sounds like a fancy word. Sounds like, oh, that sounds a lot nicer than being hospitalized. But is it? We're going to be looking at psychiatry, quality of life. How do we measure whether or not someone is living their best life? YOLO. Independent living. What does that mean? What does that look like? How independent are you if you have X, Y, Z? A few future systems. What can we do to make the system better? And some kind of types of services and recovery that might be on offer. Now, here's a little bit about myself. So I am the community lead at Exceptional Individuals. That essentially translates to I work with people who are neurodivergent every single day. So I've got that experience working with lots of different minds. I'm also neurodivergent myself, so as we learned previously, that means expert by experience. We also mentioned how there's pros to cons to that. Currently doing my master's in neuroscience, so that hopefully balances out my understanding a little bit more. I've been a previous carer, and I've been very kind of enraveled in community care, either as a beneficiary or as a provider. And I've also been a youth worker. So that's kind of my rough background. Okay, we've got Beverly says, I have my own PA, not because of neurodiversity, but because of other issues, and I have struggled to get on one since my last one left. But now I've gone one who is wonderful. That's brilliant. I think it really does, vary so much in the quality of care. When I was really struggling with mental health, I went for like 2.5 years trying to find a doctor who would actually listen and believe me. And eventually I found one. But I tell you, 2 years might not sound that much, but when you're really struggling, it felt like a lifetime. Now, here are a couple of things I've learned throughout my journey. First of all, neurodivergence is complicated. It really isn't a one size fits all. When we say it's unique, it really is unique. Society doesn't understand neurodiversity. Very true. Everyone has either no understanding, little understanding, or a particular understanding which doesn't relate to other people. And if you say, oh, I've got autism, well, it doesn't mean you'll know what autism is like for everyone else, but they'll make the same kind of judgments, or it'll be outdated, or it'll be based on biases. We know that people live well with neurodivergence, so it doesn't have to be a negative. In many times, it can be a positive, or I would say probably the best case scenario is it just is. It just is what it is. And that's something we're also talking about today. We're not talking about curing neurodivergence. One, because you can't. Two, it doesn't need curing. But the impact that living with being neurodiverse in a world which doesn't cater for it does mean there are challenges which do need supporting. Neurodivergent can cause a lot of anguish. That just means, life can be tough with it. And good understanding helps. Out of all the things we do, people having a good amount of empathy and understanding tends to have the biggest impact when it comes to helping people. So, quick question to all of you. In your own opinion, and this is anonymous, do you think neurodiversity is a mental illness? Yes or no? So thumbs up or thumbs down. It is not. I've already mentioned it. It's not. Now, Basil says it can be. And you're right. It can be. But this is where it gets a little bit murky and grey. So when we're talking about things like dyslexia, autism, dyspraxia, I would say no, they're not. It's a cognitive variation on how your brain processes information. But when you get to things like schizophrenia, psychosis, things like that, which arguably could be seen as neurodiverse because it's a different way of processing the world. But I would say 9 times out of 10, when we're talking about neurodiversity, we're just talking about the variation of the brain. We're not saying it's good nor bad. And I would also say neurodiversity or neurodivergent tends to be something you are born with and you have your entire life, where mental illness tends to be something you develop over time, which can be cured. Now, again, there's always examples that contradict this, but for the basic argument's sake, no, it is not. And I would say ADHD is not a mental illness, but what I would always say with people is you're welcome to challenge me on any of these kind of views, and I can tell you why I believe one way, and you are welcome to tell me why you might believe another. But I think there's more harm than benefit in classing it as an illness. Now, hopefully, we're going to be looking a little bit beyond just acceptance today, because everyone's always like, woohoo, neurodiversity acceptance. Yeah, great. You know what it is now. Pat yourself on the back. We're beyond that now. Let's look at how can we push the argument and the debate and the discussion forward. So let's have a little spin of the wheel. What are some of the things we could be looking at? Woo, biomedical theory. Ooh, what's that? Well, let me read this first because it is a bit of a mouthful. So, psychological theory, which I'll get to in a second, explains human behavior and mental processes. So, how the brain acts and how we get about what we do. Well, biomedical theory views mental illness as a biological disorder treated through medical interventions. So, one is more like, let's just support the individual, their own mannerisms, how they act, how they think. And another one is kind of going at it like with the nanometers, and kind of looking at like medication. So those are some of the ways that you might want to look at it. It's not going to be for anyone. Some people will just look about it in society. How about forget any treatment? Let's just make sure other people are more caring and considerate. And whoop. And yeah, we've done that. And how to support. So there are I would say, four key areas of what we can do. One is supporting from like a drug perspective. Another is supporting with, say, like CBT therapy. Another one is supporting other people to be more kind and considerate. And another one is just finding support. So a nice quote from Peter Tyrer, I'm guessing that's how you say his name, is when it came to like understanding community psychology, he said, to some extent, it merely seems to imply extramental psychiatry. So this is psychiatry which is on the fringes of society, kind of things that aren't taken as seriously or given as much weight. But he said to others, it's a specific form of care that involves particular skills and processes. So what Peter is saying here is that some people see it as like a budget version of supporting someone, and other people see it as an alternative, equal form of supporting someone. Now, are we having community care because the hospitals are filled up, the NHS is at breaking point, or are we having community care because it's genuinely the best approach for some of us? Again, that's an open question. And to that question, let me know. In your opinion, do you like community care? Love it? Hate it? Or is it somewhere in between? Oh, nice. Evelyn says, so informative and insightful. Lovely learning and from you all. Lovely to have you. Okay, so yes, we got some of you love it. I personally think it's great when done right. When enough resources, money and support and expertise has been put into it, it can be great. As I said, we've done a previous talk on if something is completely based on expert by experience without any like academic or science background, things can get a bit dodgy there. But if you have a nice balance, it works out really well. Oh, Jane says, I like the idea of it when done properly. Yeah, I definitely couldn't agree more. Now, here's a funny little sketch from a comic which is called Clare in the Community. Obviously, a play on the words from Care in the Community. And there's lots of little like satire bits about it. It's been running for quite a few times now. And this particular cartoon, a guy is shouting at a bunch of disinterested men, and he says, come on, men's group, we are well into 2019 and we need a decision on it. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie or isn't it? And this is taking a bit of a joke at the fact that, are these groups even meaningful? We have lots of these discussions and debates. Do they even do anything? To be honest, you could even argue that with this session very now. Like, are we having an impact? I mean, I like to think so, even if it's a drop in the ocean, but it's debated, It very well might be falling on deaf ears. Still, interesting to kind of consider that perspective anyway. So for community care, do you think it works well? Of course, that is individual, but on the most part, do you think it's no cheaper than care in the hospital? So again, is it a budget approach, or do you think it costs the exact same amount of money? Is it responsible for large hospital closures? This is a really interesting one, because if community care is cheaper, does it mean that hospitals which are very expensive are more likely to close down because there's a fitting alternative? And practitioners have a lack of training. Do people in the community who do the training, are they trained less rigorously as that what you might get in a hospital? These are really important questions, okay? who am I to say whether or not these are right or wrong? But I think we'll all have our individual ideas and views on these. So let's kind of work around them. We got works well for most people. I would say 50-50, in my personal opinion. Some people it does, some people it doesn't. I remember when I first had CBT therapy, I was like, what is this? What are you going on about? And I think the challenge is that it wasn't tailored for neurodivergent individuals. So it didn't take my way of processing in mind, hence wasn't really that effective. But when it was kind of tailored a bit more and the person supporting me had a bit more of a well-rounded view, it worked. But I also know, as someone who is on the autistic spectrum, that some of the kind of analogies or like visualizations they wanted me to have just did not work for me. We also got, is it cheaper? No, I would, because you've got so many factors. One, you've got to have buildings, you've got to still pay for people, and also if let's say it doesn't work, for example, those people are still going to need support. They might end up on benefits or not being able to work, when actually, if they had the right support, they could have been able to work. Maybe eventually down the line, they'll have like a far worse kind of mental health challenge. So I don't think it's as clear to say it's cheaper or it's not. You've got to zoom out. But naturally, politicians will only think in the next like 4 or 5 years in advance. Is it responsible for large hospital closures? Well, yes, because one of the reasons why all the hospitals were shut down is to move things into the community. But I think this is like what came first, the chicken or the egg. I think this was I don't think we should blame community care for it. I think community care was like the scapegoat. And practitioners lack training. Well, yes, some of them have less formal training, but they'll have different training. They might have, again, the expert by experience. They might be individuals who have been where you currently are and have been able to come out the other side and might be able to give you that unique insight where, say, a doctor with no kind of personal connection could ever give you. Oh, James says, some people I know describe CBT as prescribed gaslighting. Do you know what? I kind of saw that at the first. I mean, it does work for some people, but it has to be done in the right way. Like, I remember I would have 15-minute sessions once a week for 6 weeks. That was not enough for it to have any impact. And all they were doing is just kept giving me worksheets, like, have a worksheet, have a worksheet. Honestly, do you think I'm going to do that worksheet? I have dyslexia. I'm bloody depressed. I'm not going to do that worksheet. So it didn't really work. Or Basil says CBT for someone with ADHD, maybe not the right approach. Yeah, again, because I sharing probably a bit too much now, but I had a health anxiety, right? And when I kind of would my brain gets fixed on something and it finds it very difficult to unfix itself. So let's say I've got a headache. I think so much about it that it gets worse and worse and worse. Now, CBT was all about kind of doing like a body check, checking into yourself, kind of feeling like, how are you feeling? What hurts? Like being present. I did not want to be present. It was being present which got me into this mess. So because that wasn't kind of understood, it did not help. But again, different people might work differently. Now, what is the biggest positive of community care? So we've got addresses needs in an accessible way. This means everyone can have access to it. It's not as intimidating and daunting as going to a hospital. If I could just nip down the local high street and have someone to talk to, nice and easy. It builds on first-hand experience, so it's people who have actually been there, arguably more credible. Promotes a network of support. This isn't a one and done. You make friends, you build up relationships, can be great. And it also emphasizes services that are evidence-based. So these aren't just nothing, it is actually still based on evidence. Now, these are some of the positives. You could easily kind of debate and argue every one of these, but these are some of the prominent selling points. Okay, let's see, and promotes a network of support. That got the best one, and that could be really great. Now, I would add, though I have made some great kind of connections and friends through these sort of areas, I will say, though, on the other side, sometimes if you're in a bad place and the people you hang out with in a bad place, they can pull you back in. And it's not always that helpful. I know a lot of my mum's friends, because my mum has suffered with mental health, and she doesn't probably mind me talking, I hope. Some of her friends have been a bit dodgy, and she says, they get me, they understand me. I can appreciate that, but then when they are having worse challenges, they can trigger her challenges, and yeah, I'd like, I want to be a nice person, say, yeah, have them over. But when they come over our house and talking about like hurting themselves, I'm worried about their impact. So, it's, I'm not saying it's all bad, but I have seen the other side of it as well. Now, there are a few approaches to care. You've got your community care or your hospital care. So we've got focus on strengths. Do you think community care focuses on strengths or hospital care? We've got reliance on professional interventions, commitment to user involvement and empowerment, emphasis on biological treatments. So these are the type of kind of things which make what are the key differences. It's not just one's based in the community and one's in a hospital. There are a lot of other differences. So let's have a look. I think these look correct. So community care, very rightly, focuses on strengths. A lot of the time, it isn't about curing, it's about managing and living your best life despite of having something. So it might say, you might suffer extreme pain, we can't do anything about that, but what we can do is help you manage it better and still live successfully. It can also help you reshift your perspective into positives. Then we've got the next one, reliance on professional interventions, very much hospital care. These could be, medication, procedures. You are going in there for a very certain reason, an action that can be performed that can hopefully improve things. Commitment to user involvement and empowerment, very much community care. Community cares have lots of ambassadors, they have focus groups, they have boards. It's working with people for people. In the hospital, you don't want that sort of involvement. A doctor's not kind of asking you, like, okay, how should we do this? Quite often they say, this is how we do it, yes or no, if you have a choice. And then the last one, emphasis on biological treatments. Again, hospitals, very clear cut. You cannot go into community care and get any biological treatments, or at least I don't think you should be. Now, let's look at measuring needs. How do we know who needs what? Is community care the right thing for you? If so, how do you know? Now, there's a few ways of doing this, right? There's different forms and processes. One of them is called CANSAS, and that is the Camberwell Assessment of Needs Short Appraisal Scale. I know, catchy, right? And on here, this is gave a little bit of an idea of what the form looks at. So it's all about looking at if your needs are met. And this is very personal per person. So you'd say, okay, do you feel that you get enough food? If yes, your needs are met. You're filled up, you're done. If you're always hungry, your needs are not met. And this goes to the real primal part of being a human, very like the bare basics. We got, can you care for your home? Well, are you able to keep it clean and tidy and in a nice way? Well, if you have, your needs are met, because housing is a really important part of your well-being. And we're not just talking about having a house. If you have a house that's a complete mess, that's not a healthy way of being. Issues with cleanliness and tidiness, again, that backs that further point up, and then trouble with reading and writing. So what this form is saying is, forget all the other stuff. I don't care about your diagnosis. I don't care about this, that, and that. It's saying, are you able to have the real basics in order to live I think, good enough life? Like, okay, in life, we need food. We need a house. We need to have good hygiene. And we also need to interact with the world around us, such as reading and writing. I know the last one, you might think maybe that's not such necessity, but I would argue in the world we currently live in, it kind of is, because it would really make you quite debilitated if you aren't able to access these things. I mean, I could say this group, we've got reading and writing being the last one. Not surprising considering I reckon a fair few of us have dyslexia and other challenges. The next one, which people look at, is called MANSA, and this is the Manchester Short Assessment for Quality of Life. None of these forms are perfect, but they're different ways of measuring more or less the same thing, but they might have different emphasis on different areas, on considered what is considered the bare basics on a good life. So on Mensa, they'll look at the type of things such as job. Do you have a job which can pay enough money for you to live your life? Is it a job you love and enjoy? We've got, Basil says 4 and 2, so relationships and financial. Yeah, next one, financial. Can you do that? Mental health, relationships. So let's see. So top dog is job. Well, I think that's true. Like jobs are really important, not just for money, but also for routine and to give life purpose. Purpose is such a massive thing. I've tried working in jobs where I didn't have a personal drive, and for me, I couldn't do it. I know some people say, well, for me, money is all that matters. Well, I would say that still kind of matters because what you're saying is for you, that matters. So it is important. For me, impact and helping people is important. So depending what's important to you. Mental health, invaluable. You can't do anything if you got bad mental health. I remember, was able to have a house, have a job, have a partner, but my mental health was bad and none of it was worthwhile. Financial, money can't buy you happiness. Well, I would argue it can to a certain point. If you have absolutely nothing, life's going to be a lot more harder. I think you want to have at least the kind of average amount in order to meet your needs. And relationships. Interestingly, that's got the lowest one. I would have put that a bit higher, but honestly, all of these are very important. Now, here's a question. What services should we focus on to achieve good outcomes? So what do I mean by this? Out of like all the things that are available to us as a community, what do you think have the biggest impact in our quality of life? Examples could be therapy sessions, it could be schools or nurseries, it could be religious institutions, housing, anything which you think if we were to put more emphasis and focus and money and resources, we would be a lot better as a society, regardless of kind of conditions. So a focus on accessible services in key areas like healthcare, education, and social support to promote well-being and quality of life as some examples. All right, nice. We've got individual support. Nice. So making it personal. And that is one of the most difficult things. People love doing group interventions because it kills more birds with one stone, but not always most effective. Health. Yep, looking after health. I genuinely think the NHS is like the best thing about our country, but it's also something which is clearly underfunded. Education, nice. Education. Undoubtedly important. So now we're going to like shift it on a little bit and looking at understanding recovery. And I put a picture of Eminem's album. It's a banger, but just because it was a funny relation. Now, do we even know what it means to recover? And knowing what recovery is can help us know what support we actually need in order to get to that place. So my quick question to a lot of you is, what does recovery look like for you? And again, this is really personal. Like, say if you were unwell, at what point would you say, I am recovered? Like, where's that kind of threshold? And this could relate to physical or mental health. Maybe it would be the same kind of like tipping point, maybe not. Well, Basil says, normal lifestyle recovered. No, so whatever you consider your normal day to day. Yeah, I would say that. What else have we got? We've got more positive outlook to like what you had before. I know when I was struggling quite a lot with mental health, I just wanted it to get better. And I think the doctors very rightly weren't able to promise me that. But what they can do is say, how can we get to a point in life where you're able to manage and still do the things you want to do in life? More positive feelings. So we're saying it's just better than where you currently are. But let's say like you were here, you're now here. If you even get halfway, is that still a benefit? Feeling hopeful, recovery, no. I mean, maybe, I mean, I don't know if there's is a right answer for this. It is one that I personally struggle with. Like, if you break a leg and then your leg is fixed, recovery. But with mental health, if you had a breakdown and you were feeling suicidal and now you're just feeling depressed, like, is that recovery or is that recovering? What happened if you have like a condition like arthritis where you're always going to have arthritis? Is recovery being able to manage the pain and not have it kind of control your entire life? Mental health continuum? Nice. I mean, these are all really interesting questions. So, recovery. This is what Slade from 2019 says about it. Sounds like a rock band, but we'll work with it. So they said recovery, to them at least, is new views on living with the condition. So have you changed your outlook and your perception on what it means to have this condition? Have you shifted your continuum? You know, like from negative to positive, debilitating, manageable. It's more about how you like form those ideas in your head. We got to start with personal experiences. So recovery is basing it on your own life and your own experience. So this is coming up with your kind of own viewpoint. Provide insight into needs. Recovery is understanding what you need. When you are totally hopeless and you don't know where to go to, you're in a bad place. But when you know that you need sleep, you need food, you need rest, you need people around you, when you understand what your needs are, even if those needs are different to the vast majority of others, maybe that's recovery. And we've also got proposed service changes. So Slade says here that recovery is when you're able to then benefit those around you and improve upon the care. When you're in a bad place, you can't even think about tomorrow. But when you're in a place that's well enough to critique and say what things need to be changed and what could be better, that is an example of being in a place of recovery. You might not agree with it, but I definitely think there's a few nuggets in there which are definitely food for thought. Okay, now on to this disturbing meditating cat. Which recovery meaning do you know best? So what do you think is the one you're most familiar with or agree with more? Is it the natural recovery? So just relax, your body will recover over time. Or is it clinical recovery when they give you antibiotics and medication? Because our bodies are amazing. I would say 9 times out of 10, you leave your body alone, it will recover on its own. Other times, medication will speed it up. Other times, medication is the only alternative. Most people will go with clinical recovery, and that's because, you know, it's a very Western thing to do. There's a lot of other kind of cultures which do not have that as the first port of call, not only for cost, but just societal reasons. But I know in the UK, you know, got a bit of a headache, let's quickly have some pills and like paracetamol. So which community services do you use? And all of these are different types of care. So you've got housing authorities. Do you work with someone who gives you housing or maybe like, you know, any sort of housing support? Inpatient support, so this could be like in a hospital or any sort of institutions, social services, maybe adult social services, child social services, like different adoption ones, any of those sorts. Faith communities, maybe you're part of some sort of faith or religion, specialist mental services, or education. Now, all of these are things which can greatly support your mental well-being and support you with these journeys. For instance, faith communities, regardless of what your religion is, can be really helpful because they're a bunch of people who have shared values who work together in order to support one another. Education, the more you know, the better. My mental health inspired me to do my master's in neuroscience. And the more I've learned about it, the more I felt in control of my own kind of thoughts. So yeah, thanks everyone. Really interesting. Now, what makes a good service? So when you're receiving support, be it anything from education to supporting you in a shop to like the police, anything, What do you think actually makes that service good? Because when we look at community care, we need to ask ourselves what makes it good and what makes it not good. Is it the kind of actual structure of what it is, or is it the way it's executed? For instance, I don't think anyone would say having the fire force are bad, but if they're not very good at doing their jobs, they're not trained, maybe not. I think they are, though. Okay, we've got friendly staff. Yes, I totally agree. Staff make the world of difference. I went to a physiotherapist the other day, and he literally said to me, the thing I do every single day, my main reason I get paid is to myth bust. My job is just to have friendly chats with people and help change what they thought was true. I don't actually do any physical like manipulation or stuff. Knowledgeable staff, you have people who know what they're talking about. And this is a range of knowledge. So I wouldn't say just clinical knowledge, also personal experience, but it has to be, I think, a good combination or mixture. Now, Dr. Pat Deegan says this, which I think is quite poignant. The goal of recovery is not to become normal. And I know one of you mentioned that, to be back to normal, but maybe you meant you're normal. But Pat is saying, no, it's not normal. The goal is to deeply embrace the vocation of becoming more deeply, more fully human. And I think this is really beautiful. I'll read it again because it needs a bit of picking. The goal of recovery is not to become normal. The goal is to deeply embrace the vocation of becoming more deeply, more fully human. So recovery is understanding yourself. When you understand how your brain works, how your body works, when you're able to like put the pieces together and understand what does what, why it does what, and how, when you have understood more closely what it means to be a human being, that is when you have reached the point of recovery. So you could argue that a lot of people who have no mental health challenges or no physical disabilities still are not in a place of recovery. Again, interesting outlook. And I'm going to sum it up there because this is a lot of food to thought and we have touched upon a lot of different issues. But if any of you want to dive a little bit deeper, here are some lovely references that I looked at today for this. Feel free to get them later on the recording because I appreciate there's a lot here. And if any of you are in the UK and currently in the workplace and would like further support, because getting community support, particularly if you aren't receiving any benefits or additional support, can be a challenge, you might be eligible. Definitely get in contact about that. Essentially equipment, one-to-one support, mentoring. But if you did enjoy today, do check out our YouTube channel, and we have all our videos recorded and you're welcome to watch them if you like. Like that button, ding the bell, all that great YouTube stuff. And our next webinar, which I highly encourage you all to attend, is actually a really popular one. We've got lots of sign-ups for this one, is pharmacological interventions. We're going to be taking a deep dive into, should we medicate neurodivergent people with a hyper focus on ADHD? It's going to be a little bit controversial, but it's interesting. So today we focus on community care. Next week, we're going to be focusing on medical interventions. Should we pill people up? Should we not? And just so you know, I'm going to be my absolute best to be as kind of non-biased as possible. There are pros and cons to these interventions. Why do they work for some? Why do they not work for others? What happens if they don't work at all? So that's next week, Thursday, the 20th of April at 12. Our webinars are nearly every single week, always on Thursdays at 12 UK time. Now, don't want to brag, got nominated for an award. Now, if any of you could vote for me, I'd be very glad. It's for it being an inspirational thing. And last of all, if any of you want to get in contact for support or any guidance, you're very welcome to. And it's just exceptionalindividuals.com or admin@exceptionalindividuals.com. Or if you want to email me personally, it's nat@exceptionalindividuals.com. All right, that's been a lot of me talking, but I really hope a lot of you found this useful, interesting, insightful, thought-provoking, enlightening evening, and hopefully I'll join you back for the following weeks if you're able to join. Thanks everyone for attending. Great to have you, and again, hopefully see you again soon.